On the most important day of my life, my parents weren't there. They skipped my wedding to celebrate my sister's award instead. Hi, I'm Emma. And for as long as I can remember, I lived in my sister's shadow. But nothing prepared me for the heartbreak of realizing I wasn't even second best. I wasn't even considered. Have you ever felt invisible to the people who were supposed to love you the most? Share your story or thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how you found your own kind of family. The soft clouds hung low over the garden, pressing the scent of damp earth and fresh blossoms into the air. I stood near the arch, smoothing the folds of my simple satin dress, pretending that everything was exactly as it should be. My phone buzzed in my hand, one last flicker of hope that maybe they had changed their minds. But it was just another weather alert, warning about possible drizzle. I tucked the phone away without checking it again. I had already read the last message from Mom a dozen times. Your sister's award ceremony is a once-in-a-lifetime event, she had said. No hesitation, no apology. The words played on a loop in my head as guests began to arrive, a soft murmur of greetings and the occasional click of heels on the flagstone path filling the space around me. Liam found me by the arch and took my hand. His touch was warm, grounding. They're not here, I said, keeping my voice light as if I were commenting on the weather. He squeezed my fingers gently. They're missing out. I nodded, though the tightness in my chest didn't ease. I forced a smile as Liam's parents, Michael and Sarah, approached with open arms and kind eyes. They fussed over me like I was their own daughter, adjusting my veil and telling me how beautiful I looked. I clung to their kindness, letting it prop me up. The ceremony began under the muted light of a sun trying its best to peek through the gray. Liam's family filled the front rows, their smiles wide and genuine. My side, meant for Richard and Helen Bennett, remained starkly empty, the white folding chairs gleaming like accusation under the soft sky. As the officiant spoke, I caught myself glancing again and again toward those empty seats. I should have been looking at Liam, focusing on the vows we had written carefully over late-night coffee dates and quiet afternoons. Instead, my heart kept snagging on the space where my parents should have been, my mind trailing back to every birthday party where Olivia's talent show or science fair took center stage, every graduation where my own diploma felt like a side note to whatever grand achievement Olivia had lined up next. When it was my turn to speak, I had to pause longer than necessary, gathering the pieces of myself. Liam waited patiently, his brown eyes steady and full of understanding. I finally found my voice, shaky but sure, and promised him my life, my laughter, my love. The reception was simple and joyful. Friends toasted us with flutes of sparkling cider and glasses of wine, and Liam's cousins danced barefoot on the damp grass. Someone had brought a guitar, and music floated into the evening like mist. It should have been enough, and in some ways it was. But when I slipped away from the crowd, the sky now a deeper gray threatening rain, I couldn't help myself. I pulled out my phone, thumbing through the notifications. There it was, freshly posted, the photo of my parents, beaming under bright lights, standing proudly beside Olivia in a gleaming hotel ballroom 3 states away. She held a glass trophy, shimmering like it had been dipped in gold. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the image. Their smiles were wide, unguarded, full of a pride I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Maybe never. My bouquet, still clutched in my other hand, trembled slightly. The white lilies and baby's breath seemed absurdly fragile now, tiny symbols of innocence and hope wilting under the weight of reality. The wind stirred around me, lifting the edges of my veil and sending a cool shiver down my spine. I knew Liam would come looking for me soon, but for a moment, I needed to be alone with this feeling. The realization settled heavy in my bones, older than today, older even than yesterday. I had spent so much of my life trying to earn a place in their spotlight, only to find that the light had never been meant for me. A single raindrop landed on the screen of my phone, smearing the image slightly. I tucked it away, cradling my bouquet like it might hold me up. For once, I whispered into the gathering dusk, I wanted it to be about me. The wind carried my words away, and in their place the first fat drops of rain began to fall. It was always Olivia's moment. I was just background noise. That thought clung to me like the misty rain outside, pressing against the windows of our little apartment. I sat curled into the corner of our worn beige couch, scrolling absently through my phone. Post after post flashed past my eyes. Olivia at the podium, Olivia shaking hands with company executives, Olivia grinning under a shower of confetti at some gala. Congratulations poured in from every corner of the country. Old friends and distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years, gushing about her success. I told myself I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't searching for even a single photo of our wedding day, reposted, or a simple note of acknowledgement from the family that had shaped me. But deep down, I knew better. Hope was a stubborn thing. It clung to the smallest cracks in the foundation, even when experience told you there was no point. The ding of a new message pulled my attention away from the endless stream of accolades. It was from Mom. My stomach tightened even before I opened it. "Hope your wedding went well, sweetie," she wrote, as if we were casual acquaintances passing in a grocery store aisle. No mention of regret. No apology for missing it. Just a breezy afterthought sandwiched between Olivia's award posts and updates about their latest vacation to Napa Valley. I set the phone face down on the coffee table and leaned back against the cushions, closing my eyes. The smell of rain seeped in through the cracked window, mixing with the faint scent of the candle Liam had lit earlier. Something vanilla and warm. It should have been comforting. I heard the familiar creak of the floorboards as Liam crossed the room. Without a word, he sat beside me, offering a paper cup with a green mermaid logo. I took it, feeling the heat seep into my palms. The spicy scent of pumpkin and cinnamon rose up, and for the first time all afternoon, I felt the tightness in my chest loosen just a little. We sipped in silence for a while, the rain tapping a gentle rhythm against the glass. "You don't have to pretend it doesn't hurt," Liam said softly, breaking the quiet. I looked at him, the easy patience in his face, the way he left space for me without pushing. Tears pricked behind my eyes, but I blinked them back. "It's not just about the wedding," I said finally, my voice rough. He nodded like he had known that all along. "You've been carrying this for a long time, Em." The words stirred something inside me, something raw and heavy. I set the cup down carefully and got up, crossing the room to the hallway closet. I pulled down a battered shoebox from the top shelf, dust motes dancing in the slanted light as I brought it to the coffee table. Inside were the relics of a childhood spent trying to be seen, crumpled certificates of participation, faded ribbons, a few snapshots where my smile stretched a little too tight. I pulled out a journal, its pink cover worn soft with years. Flipping it open, I found page after page of entries in my awkward, looping handwriting. "Won second place in art contest today," one entry read. Mom said, "That's nice, honey," but she had to leave early for Olivia's science fair. Another, "Got picked for the school play." Mom and Dad might come if they're not too tired from Olivia's regional math competition. And another, "Today was my birthday." Olivia got an internship at Dad's company. We had cake after dinner. Each line pressed a little deeper into the hollow spaces inside me, carving out old wounds that had never really healed. I didn't realize I was crying until Liam knelt beside me, a hand resting gently on my back. He didn't say anything, just stayed there, a steady presence as the memories washed over me. It wasn't about a missed wedding. It wasn't even about Olivia's award. It was about a lifetime of being an afterthought, a supporting character in someone else's triumphant story. I traced a finger over the edges of the journal, feeling the ridges where my younger self had pressed the pen too hard. How many times had I told myself it didn't matter? That love didn't need to be loud to be real? The truth was simpler and harder. Love, when it's real, doesn't leave you questioning whether you were ever enough. I set the journal gently back into the box, smoothing the pages down carefully. I didn't close the lid, not yet. Some things needed air before they could heal. The rain outside deepened into a steady downpour, but inside, wrapped in the quiet of our little apartment, something fragile and important had finally cracked open. And for the first time, I didn't rush to patch it shut. Maybe family isn't where you're born. Maybe it's who claps for you when no one else does. That thought settled deep into my bones as we pulled into Michael and Sarah's driveway, the soft light from their windows spilling into the crisp evening air. It smelled like November, smoke from distant chimneys, damp leaves crushed underfoot, and something rich and buttery drifting from the kitchen. Liam squeezed my hand before we got out of the car, a silent check-in. I gave him a small smile and nodded. I wasn't sure what I was walking into. His family had always been kind, welcoming even, but part of me still flinched at the idea of stepping into a big family holiday without the people I had spent my whole life trying to please. Inside, the house buzzed with warmth. Voices overlapped in laughter. Kids darted between the adults with sticky fingers and crayon-stained drawings, and the kitchen counter groaned under the weight of a traditional Thanksgiving feast. Turkey, green bean casserole, stuffing, cranberry sauce. The comforting smells hit me all at once, wrapping around me like a familiar blanket I hadn't realized I'd missed. Sarah was the first to spot us, drying her hands on a dish towel before pulling me into a hug that smelled like cinnamon and hope. "We're so glad you're here, Emma," she said warmly. "It's not Thanksgiving without everyone together." Everyone. I swallowed against the sudden lump rising in my throat and smiled back, meaning it more than I expected. "Thank you for having me." Michael clapped Liam on the shoulder and joked about carving the turkey wrong again this year, making everyone within earshot chuckle. I slipped into the flow of the evening, moving between the bustling kitchen and the crowded living room, where toddlers built precarious towers out of building blocks, and someone had started a lively debate about whether marshmallows belonged on sweet potatoes. I found myself laughing, real laughter that shook loose the heavy corners of my heart. I wasn't background noise here. I wasn't an obligation or an afterthought. I was just Emma. And somehow, that was enough. As we sat down for dinner, Liam's niece, a bright-eyed 6-year-old named Ellie, wiggled her way between me and Liam. She handed me a piece of folded construction paper, grinning wide enough to show her missing front teeth. "For you," she said proudly. I opened it carefully. Inside was a wobbly crayon drawing of me holding hands with a stick figure version of Ellie, hearts floating above our heads. At the bottom, in careful, uneven letters, she had written, "You're my favorite." I pressed the picture to my chest for a moment, overwhelmed by the simple, earnest affection. I leaned down and whispered, "You're my favorite too," making her giggle so hard she nearly fell off her chair. Later, after second helpings of pie and a chaotic attempt at family board games, I slipped away to the quiet of the front hallway to retrieve my phone from my coat pocket. A new voicemail blinked at me, waiting. I didn't need to listen to know who it was from. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, the cursor pulsing patiently. Then, curiosity got the better of me. I hit play and lifted the phone to my ear. "Hi, honey," Mom's voice chirped, too bright, too forced. "We were thinking it would be nice if you joined us for Christmas this year. Olivia will be flying in, and it would be good to have everyone together again." She didn't mention the wedding, didn't mention the empty seats or the text message or the way my heart had cracked clean in two. I stood there in the dim hallway, the sounds of Liam's family laughter spilling from the living room, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not even sadness, just a quiet, resolute understanding. I didn't have to keep chasing something that was never going to be mine. I didn't owe my presence to people who only wanted me around when it was convenient for them. Family wasn't about obligation. It was about showing up, loving loudly, choosing each other over and over again. I pressed delete without hesitation, the voicemail vanishing into digital dust. Behind me, Ellie shrieked with delight as someone let her win at a board game, and Liam's laugh rumbled low and familiar. This time, I chose me, and for the first time, that choice felt like freedom. "We missed you at Christmas," Mom's voicemail said. Funny, I hadn't even noticed. The cold seeped in through the cracks of our old apartment windows, threading its way through the rooms despite the space heater humming in the corner. I stood by the small wooden table near the door, flipping through a stack of mail that had built up during the holidays. Liam was in the kitchen, humming softly as he stirred a pot of hot cocoa on the stove, the rich smell of chocolate and cinnamon curling through the air. At the bottom of the pile was a thick envelope addressed in my mother's careful script. I held it for a moment before opening it, my breath fogging slightly in the chilly room. Inside was a glossy Christmas card, a collage of smiling faces captured in warm, professional photos. There was Olivia, of course, front and center, her golden hair catching the light just right, her award clasped proudly in one hand. My parents stood behind her, beaming. I wasn't in any of the pictures. There was no note beyond the printed "Happy Holidays" from the Bennetts in cheerful, swirling font. The ache that flared in my chest was familiar, like the ghost of an old injury that still twinged when the weather turned. I traced a finger lightly over the images, memories crowding in uninvited. Christmas mornings where Olivia's pile of presents dwarfed mine, her new telescope or science kits taking center stage, while I unwrapped another set of socks or a book I hadn't asked for. Mom's proud laughter, Dad's arm slung casually around Olivia's shoulder, and me, smiling too brightly from the edges. I set the card down carefully and moved to the couch, pulling a worn quilt over my lap. The window beside me rattled faintly in the wind, and I shivered even though the heat was on. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Another text from Mom. "Hope you're staying warm. Miss you." I stared at the screen for a long moment before locking it without responding. It wasn't anger that filled me anymore. It wasn't even sadness. It was something quieter, heavier, a kind of resignation that settled deep in my bones. Liam appeared a few minutes later, carrying 2 mismatched mugs of cocoa. He handed one to me without a word, his thumb brushing against my knuckles in a silent offer of comfort. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, letting it anchor me. We sat together in the soft hush of the living room, the only sounds the occasional groan of the old radiator and the faint tapping of rain against the windows. "You're allowed to be hurt," Liam said after a while, his voice gentle. "You're allowed to not be okay with how they treat you." I nodded, the words soaking in slowly, like water into parched earth. For so long, I had twisted myself into knots, trying to be understanding, trying to excuse their choices. Maybe they were busy. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe I was too sensitive. But maybe it was okay to stop making excuses. The phone buzzed again, a voicemail this time. I picked it up, thumb hovering over the notification. Without thinking too hard, I tapped play and held it to my ear. "Hi, honey," Mom's voice said, bright and familiar and unbearably distant. "We missed you at Christmas. Hope you're doing well. We'd love to catch up sometime." There was no mention of why they hadn't reached out earlier, no acknowledgement of the hurt that had widened the space between us like a frozen river. Just that same breezy, surface-level affection that left me feeling hollow. I ended the message and stared at the wall for a moment, the white paint slightly peeling at the corners. Liam didn't push. He just sat there, steady and sure, his presence a balm against the chill. I set the phone down with a soft thud and stood, moving to the doorway. The cold slipped under the door, wrapping around my ankles. I pressed a hand to the wood, feeling the vibrations of the outside world, the muted life bustling beyond our small apartment. For a long time, I had believed that silence was something to be feared, a punishment, a sign of anger or abandonment. But now, standing there in the quiet, I realized that sometimes silence was a choice, a boundary, a declaration. I didn't have to chase after apologies that were never coming. I didn't have to explain my worth to people who had decided long ago where I stood in their hearts. I didn't answer the voicemail. I didn't draft a response text. I didn't rehearse conversations in my head or imagine dramatic reconciliations. I simply let it be, and for the first time in my life, that felt like peace. Behind me, Liam clattered softly in the kitchen, humming a tuneless song as he poured more cocoa. The radiator hissed, the rain whispered, and I stood there, breathing it all in, wrapped in a quiet stronger than any words. Love shouldn't feel like begging. I thought about that a lot as the first cherry blossoms bloomed across Seattle, dusting the sidewalks and parks with pale pink petals. The city felt like it was stretching after a long winter, waking up slowly to warm breezes and golden sunlight. Liam and I spent those early spring weekends walking hand in hand through the parks, ducking into tiny coffee shops with cracked leather booths and chipped mugs, the kind of places where no one rushed you to leave. Sunday mornings turned slow and easy. We'd linger over pancakes and thick-cut bacon, reading old novels or thumbing through antique shops where the dust motes floated in the slanting light. It was the kind of life I hadn't realized I was allowed to have. Quiet, ordinary, joyful, without strings or conditions. One Sunday, after a lazy brunch at a place where the waitress called us honey without thinking, I came home to find my phone blinking with a new message. It was from Olivia. "Hey, Em, I know things have been weird. I just miss you. Family is forever, right?" I stared at the screen for a long time, my coffee growing cold in my hand. The words sat heavy on my chest, each one pressing down with a weight that was too familiar. Family is forever. A phrase thrown around like a shield, a get-out-of-jail-free card for every slight, every wound left untended. I sat down on the couch and pulled an old battered journal from the side table drawer. Tucked between the pages was a letter I had once written but never sent. I unfolded it carefully, the paper soft from being handled so many times. It was a plea, pure and aching. Paragraphs of me asking my parents to see me, to hear me, to love me in a way that didn't feel like an afterthought. I had written it late one night after another Christmas, spent smiling stiffly through another round of praise for Olivia's achievements. Reading it now, I felt a quiet, almost tender sorrow for the girl who had penned those words. Not anger, just sadness. A sadness that no longer begged for fixing. I set the letter down and picked up my phone again. My fingers hovered over the screen, drafting a reply I would never send. "I'm happy, Olivia. I'm building a life that feels right. I hope you find your own peace, but I don't owe you my pain anymore." I deleted it without hitting send. It struck me then how different this kind of letting go felt. It wasn't rage or punishment. It wasn't an act of spite. It was love. Love turned inward, fierce and necessary. Choosing peace wasn't selfish. It was survival. Later that afternoon, Liam suggested we stop by the little baby boutique a few blocks from our apartment. He needed to pick up a gift for a coworker's newborn. I agreed easily, tugging on a light sweater against the cool breeze. Inside, the shop was a soft world of pastels and plush textures, tiny hats, handmade quilts, rows of miniature shoes, so small they looked almost make-believe. I wandered through the aisles, running my fingertips over the delicate fabrics, feeling a pang I couldn't quite name. At the back of the store, nestled between shelves of baby blankets, a pair of yellow booties caught my eye. They were cheerful, like bottled sunlight, stitched with a tiny, wobbly heart on each cuff. I didn't even think. I picked them up and carried them to the register, paying in a daze while Liam chatted with the clerk about onesie sizes. Back home, I placed the booties on my nightstand, their bright color a gentle, steady reminder. That evening, I stood in the bathroom, staring down at the slim plastic stick in my hand. I had bought the test impulsively, half in disbelief, half in a whisper of hope I hadn't dared speak aloud. The minutes ticked by, long and heavy. I breathed slowly, listening to the drip of the faucet, the distant hum of traffic outside. Then there it was. 2 pink lines. Positive. I sank onto the edge of the bathtub, the world tilting softly around me. Tears sprang to my eyes, blurring the lines into a soft, shimmering haze. I pressed a hand to my belly, barely able to comprehend the life blooming quietly inside me. A whole new beginning was taking root. Not a fixing of the old wounds, not a filling of the old spaces. Something entirely new, entirely mine. I sat there for a long time, breathing in the fragile, perfect promise of it. Blood may call you back, but love roots you where you're meant to be. The golden leaves swirled across our driveway as I stood at the front window, a mug of chamomile tea cradled carefully in both hands. The autumn air outside was crisp and clean, the kind that made your cheeks pink and your heart feel a little lighter. Our house sat quietly at the end of the street, wrapped in the scent of fireplaces and fallen leaves. Inside, everything felt soft and waiting. In the nursery down the hall, Liam was adjusting the mobile above the crib, a gentle tangle of wooden animals slowly spinning. The walls were painted the softest shade of yellow, a warm buttercream that made the whole room glow. Tiny books lined the low shelves, their colorful spines promising adventures and lullabies and dreams yet to be dreamed. I wandered into the room, brushing my hand along the edge of the crib. It still felt surreal sometimes, standing here, surrounded by the life we had built from scratch. On the dresser sat an old journal, its pink cover faded from years of being tucked away. The unsent letter to my parents still nestled between its pages, untouched, since the day I decided I didn't need to send it. I picked it up for a moment, thumbing through the familiar worn paper. There was a time when I thought closure meant answers, apologies, neat endings. But maybe real closure was simpler than that. Maybe it was just deciding not to carry the weight anymore. I tucked the journal gently back into the bottom drawer underneath a stack of soft baby blankets. It didn't need to take up space in the light of this new life. As I stood there, watching Liam fuss over the mobile with a ridiculous level of concentration, he turned with a grin and held up something tiny and white. "I almost forgot," he said, his voice full of excitement. "Found this the other day." He walked over and placed a onesie into my hands. It was impossibly small, the cotton soft against my fingers. Across the front, in looping navy letters, it read, "First in line for love." My throat tightened, emotion swelling so fast and fierce it almost took my breath away. I pressed the onesie to my chest and smiled at him, feeling every broken, healed piece of me settle into something whole. "You're going to be such a good dad," I whispered. He stepped closer, resting his forehead against mine. "We're going to be good together," he said simply. Later, after dinner, we curled up on the couch, the nursery door left ajar as if to invite all that soft yellow light into the rest of the house. I rocked gently in the glider chair, humming an old lullaby I barely remembered learning, my hands folded over my round belly. The first contraction came as a low, rolling wave. I paused, breathing through it, feeling my body gather itself. No fear, no panic, only certainty. Liam noticed my stillness and looked up, eyebrows raised in a silent question. I smiled back at him, calm and steady. "It's time," I said. The hours that followed blurred into a rhythm of breath and movement, of whispered encouragement and the steady presence of Liam's hand clasped in mine. And then, finally, there she was. Tiny. Perfect. Wailing her way into the world with a strength that stole the air from my lungs. They placed her in my arms, and everything else, the old hurts, the empty seats, the ache of being second best, fell away like leaves from a tree at the first hard frost. I looked down at her, at the tuft of dark hair and the fierce little fists, and I knew with a clarity deeper than bone that the cycle ended here. She would never wonder if she was enough. She would never need to earn her place in my heart. She already had it, forever and always. I rocked her gently in the quiet glow of the nursery, humming the lullaby again, feeling the future settle around us like a promise. And this time, no one would ever have to wonder if they were enough. Holding my daughter close that night, I realized some roots aren't given. They're planted, tended, and grown with love. Life taught me that letting go of old hurts isn't betrayal. It's making space for better beginnings. Family isn't just who shares your blood. It's who stands steady when the winds rise. If this story touched a corner of your heart, I invite you to share your own journeys of love, healing, and new beginnings. After all, in a world that changes so fast, a little kindness and understanding can be the roots we all need.